Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I am today with Dave Erickson. He is an entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience. He has diverse business experience covering eSports, electronics manufacturing, gaming, software development, and PR. He is currently serving as the CEO of ScreamingBox, which provides web and mobile app development services. Hi, Dave. Welcome to the channel. How are you?
I am doing well.
Great to have you here.
It's nice being
So, Dave,
here.
you have a wide variety of experience covering esports, software development, electronics, gaming. So, tell me how you pick opportunities before you commit to put all your time and energy into it.
Well, you have to look at opportunities in several different ways. One of the key things you have to look at is it something really interesting for you? Even if it's in a field you're not familiar with, if you're really interested in it, if it excites you, if it's something that you feel you want to go in, that'll help you in keeping you motivated to do a lot of learning and trial and error and other things that come from entering a new field or entering a new opportunity. Um, if it's an opportunity that's in a field that you're very familiar with, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're going outside of your box, then you have to look at the opportunity and ask yourself, is this really solving a problem that needs to be solved, right? And if the answer is yes, because of your experience, you know that this is something that is going to solve an important problem, then that's another way to determine that's an opportunity worth exploring. If it's an opportunity in a field you're very familiar with, and it's interesting because it's a little bit new, but it's not really solving an essential problem that needs to be solved, then you have to decide, is it really something you want to be involved in? Right? The best opportunities are always opportunities where you can clearly see that it is solving a problem that really needs to be solved, right? And that's how I kind of look at any opportunity, whether it's in a field I'm familiar with or in a field I'm not familiar with. I really always try to approach the opportunity from, is it really solving a real problem, right?
Hmm.
The best opportunities are ones where the person who created the opportunity, or the entrepreneur, or the person who is doing it, was saying to themselves, "Oh, I wish, I'm trying to do this, and I keep having this problem, and I can't make it work well, and it really seems to be a barrier. What if we do it this way? Here's my new idea, and it will solve this problem," right? Because then you know it has real value. If somebody just basically said, "Oh, I like the way that thing looks, and I love this thing. I'm just going to make one and make it slightly better, or a different color, or instead of having 3 wheels, we'll put 5 wheels." Those are opportunities that tend to be looking more as a marketing opportunity, where they have a product that isn't very differentiated from what's on the market, or isn't solving an essential problem. They're looking at, well, maybe we can do something with marketing. And those opportunities, although are valid, they may not be that interesting to some people, right?
Okay, now say you have picked a theme, like an idea is there in your mind and you want to run with it. How do you validate the idea?
Well, there's a lot of different market validation steps. Uh, Probably the easiest step is just approach your own personal network and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting involved in this kind of opportunity. What do you think?" Right? And get feedback from people you trust and have a relationship with. They may not be experts in the field, they may not know anything about the market, but sometimes, people's gut reaction will give you some clues as to whether this is a valid idea or it's something that is interesting, right? Then the next step would be actually going to the market. And there are lots of ways to do that. And many of them are forums or Facebook groups or other things that are in that subject area. So if it's a product for, say, gamers, right? You could go on a bunch of different Facebook group with gamers, and without giving away the technology or what makes it different, you can ask questions that'll indicate to you whether the actual market is receptive to a type of
Mm.
product, right? So if the product is solving a problem, say, there's a bunch of different games. You have to have different logons for each game, and this product will make it so you only need one logon for all the games, right? Then you can ask a question without saying you're doing it. You could go into these forums and say, "Oh, it's really painful that I have to, log on with different logons to all these games. What do you guys think? If there was a product that could make it so that logons were you just had one logon and you didn't need a bunch of different ones, is that a product that would be interesting for you?" And you can get into a discussion, and then you can start saying, well, if the product costs $1, would that be good? If the product costs $100, would you still buy it? And you can start doing a bunch of market research without giving away what you're doing by doing that, and then you're talking to the market. The other one is to physically do something. So if your target market is solar, go to a solar convention and start asking questions. Why is this working? Why is this valid? Validating your position in the market is really, it takes work and it takes time. On the other hand, if you are going for funding, if you are looking for funding, one of the most important things that investors look for, and the most important question they will ask you is, how do you know that your idea is going to work in the
Mm.
marketplace? How do you know that your price is valid price? How do you know if the differentiation is enough to differentiate you? And they're looking for you to say to them, well, I went and talked to 100 people in the solar industry, and they all said this is a great price, or they all said that if such a product existed, they would buy it, right? Or they all said that the one feature set that none of the products have is this feature set, and if our product had that feature set, they would definitely buy it, right? You kind of need to validate that if you're going after money. Even if you're not going after money and you're bootstrapping yourself or you're doing it yourself, you want to get market feedback because it affects how you market your product. It affects how you sell your product. It also affects your product development because you may find out that when you're talking in the market about what you think the product should be, people say, yeah, that's great. But the other problem that nobody has solved is this problem. And at that point, you can say to yourself, oh, is it worth the effort to add that feature set to my product,
Mm.
right? So talking to the market, using your personal networks, going to different shows or conventions, going on, Facebook forums or any other kind of forum and asking questions. Those are all really important ways to explore the market before you actually step into it and commit
Makes
to it.
sense. Since you mentioned funding, uh, what is the thought process behind deciding whether you should raise funds or go bootstrapped way?
Well, you know, it's always better not to raise funds because when you raise funds, you're not focused on actually developing your business. You're focused on raising funds. Um, Going through the funding process helps in a way because it forces you to answer a lot of questions about your business that you might not normally answer. Um, on the other hand, you're going to be getting funders who want to know about your business, who want to be involved in your business. This is a positive and a negative. So on the positive side, if the people funding your business has a lot of connections and business experience, they will be able to advise you and help you in your business. If they are funders who are just looking to fund businesses because it's either that or stick the money in a bank, you may not get that much value out of it, but they may also be, telling you, hey, I want to see this result, and why aren't you getting me this result, and what's my ROI, and these other questions. Um, the reason to fund is never, if the reason to fund is I can't get my idea to start as a business without any funding, then you're really in a difficult position. And usually that is for businesses that require a tremendous amount of research and development on the front end. It could be a product that the only way to manufacture it is with lots of large tooling costs in the beginning. So those are kind of different challenges. If it's a technology product, a software product, even if it's a physical product, you always want to try to start by bootstrapping or getting friends and family to help get some money started so you can get the business started. One of the things that investors want is they want validation of a revenue stream. So even if you start by selling a few items or get the initial software written as a MVP to prove that people are willing to pay for it, even if you don't get enough money to really sustain the business, but you have sales and you show that people are interested in buying the product, that really goes a long way with investors, right? So if you could get to a point where you have something moving, then you go for investment not to keep it moving, but to grow it, right? And that's what investors are looking for. They're looking for somebody who says, I got something started, I have something that's working. The only way that I'm going to make it into a business, I want to be $100 million business. That's kind of the answer to funding. How big do you want to be? I want to be at least $100 million business. Okay, well, what does it need to get there? What do you need financially to start doing that? And usually it's going to be funding for marketing, funding for sales, or funding for product development, or funding for manufacturing ramp, right? And if you can show that you have a product that's currently selling or services you're providing, they're currently working, that goes a long way to start the funding journey. If you got nothing but an idea, it's really hard to get funding with nothing but an idea,
Okay.
right?
What I have seen from all the kind of founders that I follow online is there's a route. So first they are into tech, then they get some ideas, and then they move into business and startup ecosystem. So, if someone is a first time founder, what are the skill set they need to develop as a founder, as a leader of a startup? And apart from, coding and regular, the mindset shift from moving as an employee to a founder.
Mm-hmm. Well, people skills, soft skills are really important as a founder. You really have to be able to work with a lot of different people. You have to be patient and clear, and you have to have a very clear understanding of what is important for you. And you need to be able to communicate that to people, right? Um, you know, in starting a company, you're not working with a lot of different people. You're usually working with only a few people because the business is small. You don't have enough money to have a bunch of people involved. And usually those people are partners, equity partners. When you bring in partners to help you start a business, it's like getting married, and all the challenges that are with a marriage, which are usually all communication based, are there. Competing ideas, competing emotions. There's a lot of turbulence in a startup, even if it's just you and you're working with vendors or a few people. You still really need to have good soft skills to be able to get the people and the partners and all the components of your business kind of moving in one direction, right? So I would say that's most important. Um, it is the soft skills. The other things is, don't underestimate little things like understanding your accounting, right? You're starting a business, you may not have a lot of sales, you may not have a lot of anything. Get your accounting straight from the beginning. And know what's happening with the money. Even if you're talking very small money, you want to always know what your money's doing in the business, right? Um, and a lot of people just kind of say, well, I got a bookkeeper and let them deal with it. No, you kind of need to really understand the finances of your business, because a business is a opportunity that is working around money, right? You're not starting a business to trade in, flowers. You're starting a business to involve money. People are giving you money in return for something, right? So the core of every business is money, right? And so, when you start a business, you really need to be aware of money. You need to become aware of what it does, how does it get to you, how does it leave you, what is your business. A lot of people forget about margin. Margin's very important in a business because that's how you grow, that's how you finance your operations. Um, and investors are very focused on the money because they're giving you money. They want to make sure the money is used correctly, used for the right things, that they can see that there is an ROI for the future, right?
Makes sense. So now that you have mentioned people skills are crucial for first time found or any founder to start their business, but uh, how does this play in B2C environment? Like I've heard the phrase, who you know and who knows you matters in a business, but how does it correlate to a B2C environment?
Well, in a B2C environment, you have to be, the customer is not as, so your personal relationship with the customer is not as close as, say, a B2B. So in a B2B, you're dealing with organizations and you might have a person in an organization and it's more one-on-one and can be very specific. In B2C, you're marketing to a large group of people, whether that group of people has 1,000 people in it or 100 million people in it. It's a group of people. And on an individual level, people are very different. But in groups, they all have their categories, they all have their characteristics. And so, as a B2C company, you need to focus on who are your primary customer. So you really need to do customer profiles for your business. You need to say, who are the types of customers that this product is really targeted to? And you need to kind of break those down into all their little niches. And then you have to think of them as their customer profiles, not as individuals, right? And so you have to market and sell and appeal based on those niches, right? So if you're starting a business, it's really important in a B2C to focus on who is the low-hanging fruit. Who is the type of customer who is most willing to buy your product, who most needs your product, and get that as narrow as possible and start focusing with that focus, right? It's smaller, but it's much easier because you know the need, you know that the product appeals to that segment, right? Once you get that kind of going and you get a relationship with that segment, meaning they give you money, you give them something, they're happy with what you gave them, right? Then you can start looking at the segments that are next to it or close to it and say, okay, now I want to appeal to this next segment. So that customer, how do we have a good relationship with them? What is it that we need to add to our marketing or to our sales mechanism or to our product that would allow that group that's next to ours, it's similar to ours but not quite the same, to want our product? And you just kind of start expanding your customer base that way, trying to make a product that appeals to everybody, a very wide variety of customer types. It really is hard. You need a lot of money to power the marketing because you're going so broad, right? The more narrow you go, the less money you need for marketing and sales, and it makes it simpler. So when you're starting a business, keep it as simple as you can. Once you get some customers and build a relationship with that group, right? So you can look at that group not as individuals, but as a group, and think of the group as one person. How do you want to have a relationship with that group of people? Because they have similar characteristics. So it really is important to get a kind of a customer profile of who you want to go after in the market segments before you start, so you can figure out, how do you want to market to these people? What works? What doesn't work, right?
Got it. So basically, you're suggesting to study your client avatars and then segment them into categories and then go after each segment rather than forming individual one on one connections.
I mean, it depends on your product, but most consumer products, you're not trying to target an individual person. You're trying to target a group of
Hmm.
people, right? So you can say, hey, the type of person who would like my product is female, between the ages of 18 and 30, and they tend to be high school educated and they love sports, right? So now you kind of have a characteristic, right? You can focus your marketing, your product development, your sales mechanism to that group of people, right? So you know what that group is. You don't need to have a lot of marketing on channels that are sports that only men are following, because that's not really your key group initially. So you need to find marketing that targets sports that women are most active in, right? Once you get that relationship going and you're satisfying those customers, they're buying your product, they're happy with what you're selling them, then you can say to them, okay, I want to go to the male side of it, right? So what do we need to do to alter the product to make it appealable to men? So maybe you have to do a color change, or you have to put a logo on it. So it might be the same product but slightly changed. So now you're managing 2 SKUs, right? That makes the business a little bit more complicated, and you're going after the male market, which could be a smaller market or a larger market. You're going to need additional marketing advertising, but you still got your core buying from you, right? And so you keep that going, and you don't want to alienate them. And then you start marketing to this other group, and you do it initially slowly and offer a product and test out the market. And okay, if they're buying it, then great, you got that flow going. And then you can go there, and then you can say, okay, I've now captured men and women who like sports. Can the product be sold to somebody who likes, cars? Does this product somehow have a connection with cars? Yes. So let's start. What segment of car owners would most likely buy this product? So then you go after that segment, and then, okay, what's the next segment in cars that would? So
Build on it.
you have to have a strategy,
Hmm.
right? Don't try to grab too much at
Hmm.
once. It's harder to do. It takes more resources, right? When you're a big company, then you can say, okay, we've never done, we've only sold our product to men under the age of 30. Now we want to attack men and women over the age of 40. Well, that's a huge lift, right? From a marketing and sales perspective or a product development perspective. So, well, you're a big company at that point. You have the money to do that, right? But when you're starting out, you're small, you don't have resources. So you need to get really narrow and nichey to get started. And you can go to investors and say, hey, we have success in this niche. I need money to go expand. Here's my expansion strategy. Here's the segments I would like to attack related to my current business. And that's a very valid funding argument or investment opportunity, right? And investors would be like, okay, you got a product, it's working. What you really want to do is grow that business. Okay, I'm interested, right? Because it's not just getting the business started. At that point, you need the money to grow, and everybody understands that,
Mm.
right?
Makes sense. Okay. So it's like expanding your region of comfort zone within your business, targeting a bigger segment or a different segment in adding it to your catalog of clients, right? Now, Dave, you have experience in the gaming industry as well. So could you explain the whole idea of gamification? When do you think is it's the right time to start incorporating gamification in business for your clients, of
Well,
course?
yeah, gaming, eSports, and gaming that I was involved in, and gamification are very different in a
Okay.
sense. Um, so gamification is really the act of taking communication and making that communication in a way where it feels not as direct, right? And the quote gamification concept is that the communication is done in such a way that it feels like you're playing versus being interrogated, right? And so with gamification, there's many different ways to do gamification. Um, it could be literally a game where the person is playing a game, and from them playing the game, you gather information. But it could be as simple as a step through of questions, right? Um, Usually, though, in gamification, the way that they make the communication a little bit more fun or interesting is having some kind of like reward. So it may be that the gamification is a question, and with the thing, answer this question, and if you get it right, you move on to the next level, right? Now, the reward is moving on to the next level. So for people psychologically, okay, next level means I'm getting better, right? I'm doing something right. So it's in itself, it's its own reward, right? Or you can say something like, oh, well, if you get 100 points, we're going to send you a free gift. So if you answer this question and you get it right, you move on to the next level and you get 10 points. And if you answer the next question, you get 5 points. If you answer the next question, you get 20 points until you get 100 points, and then we'll send you something, right? So that's a form of gamification, right? It could be that you're trying to get market research, and so you want to understand what is people's favorite color. So you develop a game, a very simple game, where it's based on colors, and each time a user of that game clicks a color, you get data as to what their preferences are, right? That's one way to gamify as well. So gamification involves a simple strategy of usually you're trying to get some information, and you're trying to get the information in a way that makes it fun so you can get an honest answer, right? Gamification can also be used for marketing, where they play a game or they go through a step or a maze or something, and at the end they get exposed to your marketing, but they're more receptive of it because they work to get it, and so they're going to value it more because they made an effort to get to the prize, and the prize just happens to be you marketing or exposing them to a product or a service or something like that. And so you have to make those, quote, gamifications simple enough where they don't feel like I spent a lot of time and energy and all I got was some marketing, right? So there's a whole bunch of strategies for gamification that are important. But it's a very powerful tool and it can be used well. On the other hand, you can make a gamification that is too complex, too timely, and it doesn't get you the data you need, but people spend too much time on it and you waste too many resources on it. So when you approach gamification, again, you really need to figure out what are you really trying to get out of the gamification, right? And keep it as narrow and as focused as you can, because the broader it is, the more complex it is, the more resources it needs, the harder it is, the more challenging it is. So really be focused on your gamification. What is the piece of information I really need? And can my gamification make it so I get a better answer and more answers out of people, right?
I understand. But my question now is from what you just said, I understand that gamification can be done to a segment of your customers. Uh, but there's also a different approach called personalization. So, how do you decide whether to take the personalized route or whether to gamify your strategy, to find out details about your customer or something like that?
Well, they're kind of two different things. So gamification, the focus is on gathering data or leading people down a path for some kind of reveal or exposure or transaction. Personalization is where you're really trying to get a person to let you know what their personal preferences are towards a very specific product or action, right? So it's personalization is good if you already have a product. So if you have a product and you want to personalize, you want to allow the user to personalize the product. And the reason you want to do this is you need to gather data on what people's preferences are. What are your current customers' preferences, right? That's where personalization comes in. And I've seen this where people look at it like, here's our product, and their personalization capabilities of the product are very limited because they don't think it's that important, right? On the other hand, they are there thinking, well, what's our next product and how do we differentiate our next product and what is the next product we should do? If they had the data of what their current customers preferred, that would be very helpful, right? So yes, it takes some expense and it takes some work to take your current product and add a lot of personalization and then market that personalization so your customers will actually use it. And some of those personalizations may seem fairly trivial, like color and font size and other things, but you gather data about it, right? Also allowing, I've seen some products where they don't allow the person who's using the product to make a profile about themselves and upload their picture and their preferences and what they like and who they are and those things. Again, that's giving you a lot of data about your customer, right? Without having a one-on-one session like gaming would be. Like gamification kind of allows a more one-on-one type of session with specific goals. Personalization allows you to gather a lot of data about what their preferences are.
Dave, you also have a podcast, ScreamingBox. So it's been running for, I think, like 2 years. What has this podcast given you? Like, I want to know, is it soft skills? Is it networking? What business? What has this podcast fed you with?
Well, for me, it's given me two things, education and relationship, right? So every podcast I do, I always learn something, right? So the person I'm interviewing and the subjects we're talking about, I always learn something, right? And so for me, that's the best thing. You get an hour with an expert and they're telling you, they're answering any question you can ask. So it's a great learning experience, right? So that's the main reason I'm doing it. Yeah, do I think for marketing it might do something? Do I think someday somebody may come to me and say, "Hey, I saw you on your podcast. I want to do business with you." Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But for me, it's so far out there. That's not the reason for doing it. For me, it's mostly about learning something in my field or in the area. So we do technology and business. So the guests either have a business background or a technology background. And so I learned something in those fields that are related to what I'm doing. So for me, it's an education tool. And then the second one is a relationship tool. Obviously, in that time that I do the podcast, you build a relationship with that person. And so in my personal network, all the people in my podcast are people I have a relationship with now. And I've actually gone back to some of them and hooked up business and hooked them up with other people and helped their businesses. And so it's all part of this personal network and growing your personal network, which is basically how I find opportunities and find business, right? So I look at it that way. And I think the expectations of having a podcast, if your expectation is you learn something and you build a relationship, those are really great expectations. Those are usually always met by doing a podcast. If your podcast is, I want 1 million people to watch my podcast, that may not be an expectation that you'll achieve, and it may not even be an expectation that has much value. So you may not be satisfied by doing a podcast if that's your expectation, right? But if your expectation is to learn and to build relationship, you'll definitely achieve that with a podcast.
Totally.
I have been using the podcast as a way to experiment with marketing. So it was good because I started the podcast from zero and I've been able to kind of grow it by trying different marketing techniques. So for me, it was also, again, going back to education. It's allowing me to kind of experiment and play with certain marketing tools to see how they actually affect what I'm doing, right? And so that's been a beneficial part of the podcast
Growing a
as well.
podcast is not that easy, but it's worth it.
No, it isn't.
It's worth it because there are different ways, different areas in which you can see the fringes going. be it networking, be it collaborating with others, and then education, of course, like you mentioned. Basically, what I say, podcasting is
Yes.
networking in public. You get to be the cool guy who knows a bunch of cool other people, and that's how you get linked to other big creators or experts in your industry.
Correct.
So, Dave, what is your typical day like as the CEO of Screaming Box?
Well, my days are pretty busy. Not only am I doing ScreamingBox, I have another company called Rainmaker Content Marketing, where we produce a lot of written content for companies, mostly focused on startups who need a lot of base content and a content flow. These can be things like reviewing investor presentations and writing, abouts and bios and doing blog flow so that they can communicate how they can apply, their products and stuff like that. And that's a little bit different business from Screenbox, which is more for SMBs. And I balance my time between them. I have a partner in Rainmaker. She has a master's in journalism, and she lives in the East Coast. And so that's a very positive business. And I probably spend a couple hours each day on that, a couple hours on Screenbox. Actually, most of my time is on Screenbox, but most of my time on Screenbox is all
Hmm.
relation based. Doing podcasts, guesting on podcasts. I do a lot of virtual networking, business meetings outside. And so it's all about relationship. I also handle things in Screenbox like operations, the accounting. But it's a business that we've been running for 10 years now. It's pretty much operating very smoothly. The biggest challenges are usually when new projects start, making sure that all the developers are onboarded and that the project's moving in the right direction and that type of stuff. But we have a lot of experienced people, and so they move pretty fast and much smoother. So I can focus on doing the relationship stuff and looking for business.
Cool. So you juggling two different kinds of businesses. Which is your favorite one? Like, of.
Well, I look at it a little bit
Mhm.
differently. Um, I don't really look at them as two different businesses. I look at them as my
Wow.
business,
Mm-hmm.
as singular,
Mm-hmm.
right? My business is that of having relationships with people, and in having those relationships, if they have a need for web mobile app development, I put them in Screenbox. And if they have a need for content and content marketing, I put them in Rainmaker, right? So I don't see them as two separate businesses. They operate as two separate businesses, but I look at them as just my business, right? And so in the relationships that I'm developing and meeting and having conversations with people, that's what it is. I also look at my personal network as my business. So I've had a bunch of business where somebody said to me, "Hey, I need an accountant." Oh, I know a couple of good accountants. Do you need an accountant who knows, LLC accounting, or do you need an accountant who does C corps? I know a couple of accountants. I've talked to them. I'll help you, and I refer them over. So that's also part of my business, right? Not that I get a financial reward from it, I get a relationship reward, right? Because that means those people will go there, they're referred to somebody I know is good, they have a positive experience. They'll come back to me and say, "Well, oh, okay, thanks for helping me out with that. Now I need some development," right? So I look at it not as separate businesses. I look at it as I'm the business nexus. That's my job. My job is to create relationships, and whatever the needs are of those relationships, I find solutions for them, right? Two of those solutions I happen to own, and I'm happy for that. And other solutions I may not own, I'm happy to refer them over, because if you do something good for somebody, it usually comes back to you
Hmm.
later. right? So if that's my attitude, I wake up in the morning excited to do that, right? And I literally do that. I mean, I wake up in the morning and I'm either on phone calls or answering emails or other communication. Uh, I'll usually take a break just before lunch. I'm a big mountain biker. I make sure I schedule at least 3 or 4 times a week, doing an hour to an hour and a half bike ride. I live right next to the trailhead, so I can, do a nice bike ride in an hour and a half, come back, go back to work. I do work late at night sometimes. I work on the weekends. So, the reason I'm an entrepreneur is I have that freedom, right? And if you are an entrepreneur and you're not taking care of your body, your mental health, you're not going to be very effective as a business person. So I find that is really important, and I structure my day so that I have that, right? And yes, I could instead work during that hour and a half, 3 times a week or 4 times a week or whenever I go. Um, but it's not going to really change my business, right? Whereas feeling tired and depressed and not having the time to think clearly will definitely affect my business in a negative way, right? Or getting sick and going to the hospital because you never exercise. That'll also affect my business. So, that's part of the investing. You invest in yourself as well to keep yourself healthy and happy, right? And for me, mountain biking is how I stay healthy and happy, and I'm happy to do that, right?
Because we are the source of our business, we are the starting point and the finish point as well, and everything passes through our lenses when we are running a business. So our health, mental health, physical health, both need to be fit so that the business runs smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone on a bike ride feeling really frustrated because there's some business challenge or some issue or something I can't figure out, and I go with the bike ride and it kind of allows me to
Refresh.
release and
It also gives
relax.
you new
And at the end
ideas.
of the bike ride, I come back and I'm like, okay, I know exactly
Yeah.
what I need to do, right? And so it can't be hurt. And whether you go for walks, you go for a run, you do something, being outside, moving your body, it allows your mind to kind of settle down and kind of clear out. So all of a sudden you'll find answers that you didn't think there were answers for, right?
Totally. That's been my experience as well. You just take a break and then you come back with a bunch of new ideas, and then you're all excited because you have the energy. Because if you keep on running on the treadmill of business, you exhaust yourself and you don't work efficiently. You have no ideas. You just feel like you're doing with no outcome. So, breaks are important.
Exactly. Yes.
Dave, what advice would you give to your younger self if you were to go back to meet younger Dave?
Hmm. Well, I'll be really honest. I've had a great life, and I'm very happy with where I'm at. So I can't say I would do something different because I don't really have a lot of regrets, right? I'm happy with where I'm at. You know, um, there was some periods in my life where I kind of was unfocused and was just kind of wasting time. Uh, I would say to myself, "Don't do that next time." But it wasn't significant and it wasn't that much, so I don't know how much it would have changed my life. Um, but that would probably be the advice I have. You know,
Love your honesty.
but not everybody knows what they want at certain
Exactly.
times, and so sometimes you need to waste
Figure
time
out
in order to figure it
till
out.
the thing comes to
Um,
you at
but you might
times.
want to, yeah, right. Um, I guess during those times I could have spent more of my time educating myself instead of just wasting time. But again, it wasn't significant. It wasn't like I was wasting years, right? So that's probably it. I will say to people who are trying to get started in business, don't be afraid to start a business, right? But do it in a way that is respectful to yourself. So don't put yourself in a situation where if it fails, you're out on the street
Mm.
homeless, right? At the same time, take some risks. Just make sure that they're measured risk and that they don't put yourself in danger. But the best businesses, the most memorable businesses, and the best businesses I've had, and this one, ScreamingBox, is my 12th business. But the most memorable ones I've had are the ones that failed, right? Because those are the ones where I really learned something, right? And as awful a feeling as it was for failure, that's where the learning really is, because those are the lessons that you really, if you're honest with yourself, you'll say, okay, I screwed up. That's why it failed. Now I learned not to do that, right? And the most valuable things I've learned in business have been from the failures, right? So don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to start a business and it fails, but don't kid yourself that it was somebody else's
Hmm.
fault, right? You're the business owner. It was your fault. You missed something. Something didn't work. You weren't able to achieve something. It really always comes back to you. As long as you can be honest with yourself, you will learn and grow, right? And that's probably the most important thing an entrepreneur needs, or a person starting a business, is
100%
go into it
responsibility.
and yeah, don't be afraid to fail, but at the same time, don't blame it on somebody else either, right? And then you'll learn and you grow and you move on to the next business, right?
12 businesses. You have had a lot of experience in. I could read it from your profile, diverse kind of businesses you have been in. So if the things would have worked out, which of those 12 do you think you would love to continue?
Well, I really liked the solar business, and I thought the solar business had an opportunity, but unfortunately, the person I was working with, who was my father, he was the engineer on it. He passed, and as the family decided it was not, we were not going to continue with it. But I thought that business had a lot of opportunity, and I loved that industry. Um, that is one. Um, the There were some opportunities in gaming that kind of started, but didn't really go anywhere because they were too early. I know that those businesses would be very large businesses today if we hadn't folded them because it was too early. So, unfortunately, that happens in business where you're ahead, you're so far ahead that the market isn't ready, and you can't get enough traction, and then 5 years later the market's ready and it would have been somebody
What
else did it,
so
right?
if there's I've this also happens with when you are movies, like some movies they are far ahead from the times that we live in, and because of as a result they fail. So when there's such a thing happening, what do you do in such phases?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. So if your business is failing because you can recognize, because it's not always easy to recognize that you're too early, but if it's failing and you have an understanding that it's because the market isn't ready, but the market's going in that direction, you can kind of archive the business and wait for marketing conditions to change and then try starting it again, right? But most entrepreneurs, when they shut down a business, they're already thinking of another business that they want to go into because,
That's how brain works.
as an entrepreneur, you know, you're focused on your business,
Hmm.
but lots of opportunities come to you that are very different. And most entrepreneurs always have one or two opportunities in the background that they're working on because they're either advising them or they're friends or something like that. But if you do find yourself in a position where the reason the business is failing is the market isn't moving fast enough, you have the choice to archive it, shut the business down, but keep everything kind of there and ready. And when market conditions change, start it up again, right? Or start up a slightly different variation, right?
That's an excellent advice. Thank you so much, Dave, for your time. I would like to close our conversation with one last question. What is the most important lesson
Sure.
you learned about money?
Um, don't waste it. Um, and always, when you see yourself going into debt, really focus on eliminating that debt, right? It is one of the things. I've had a business where we got really into debt. I was able to manage the business and put all the resources of the business into paying off the debt and was able to pay off the debt. A lot of businesses usually call bankruptcy or fail at that point. But I was able to basically save the business and return it to profitability. But that was lost time, right? Because all the resources of the business went to paying off the debt. We couldn't do anything with the business to grow it. So for a period of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, we couldn't do anything except pay off debt, right? And then once the debt was paid off, you're kind of starting from where you were before the debt, and then you have to try to grow at that point, right? So watch your debt and watch where your money goes. And it's easy to commit. Oh, it's only $50 a month for this service and $20 for that service, and all of a sudden you got 30 services and you're spending $1,000 a month and you don't even use half of them, right? And it's easy to do that, or it's easy. Sales is a very difficult one because you have to invest a lot of money in sales, and the results usually take a long time if they ever show up, right? And so if you're going to spend money on something, make sure you have KPIs set up where you can really know if the money is actually doing something, right?
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much for your time and insights.
Well, it was wonderful to do this with you, and I hope that you and your listeners were able to get something out of it that makes them feel like they can do better in business.